Hi. Hi, YouTube family. All right. May you, your family, the air and the ground above and below you be supported, uplifted, favored, blissed. Your animals, your plants, you, your projects, your ideas, your creations, all be supported and uplifted. And may you find peace and help and support where you may need it. Okay, so shall it be. Hi. So, I have a very interesting topic to talk about today. So, first, we're going to check in with the 9-day calendar. Yesterday was Jupiter, so today is Saturn. This week we had an original day in the 9-day week calendar fall on the actual day. So Tuesday this week was Mars as well on the 9-day calendar. And then after Mars is Jupiter. And then after Jupiter is Saturn. So today is Saturn's day. Even though it is also Thor's day, which could actually make sense. But typically Thursday is related to Jupiter. So with the Saturn energy, kind of makes sense that I want to talk about this actually. Okay. So in a conversation with my brothers, my brother asked me a question. I was talking about, I've just finished a yoni steam chair that I haven't actually put to use yet, but I repurposed an old chair and created a yoni steam chair. And I'm realizing like how much of this new information, new old information that's coming to us is so healing and helpful and somewhat magical. And I'm glad for the youth that this information is out there because it wasn't out there when I was a kid. And it would have been really nice to have this information or, have this information because I know this information has always been available. Okay. So he asked me if it was true that when a group of women, when they're on their moon or on their periods, do they sync together? And I was like, yes, absolutely. And it's interesting that he brought it up because I've always kind of wondered how that happens. Like what is it in our bodies that signal to other women's bodies, hey, there's another woman around. She's on her period or she's, in that cycle of her life. And, who's, it must mean there's some type of dominance, even inherently. But ultimately, what's really interesting is that happens. It's not something that's talked about often. I haven't looked it up, but just a little bit the other day after we had that conversation. But mostly what I heard is that it was nature's way of showing us, or like mother's way or God's way of showing us how connected we are. That's how connected we are. We are so connected that even on our moon, without any thinking about it, without, you know, saying to our body, hey, there's another woman around. We need to sync up. I know this happens with moms with their daughters. When their daughters get their periods, either the daughter will sync to the mom or the mom will sync to the daughter. Um, and that word that I'm even using, they sync to each other. What? So I'm curious also what effect. The only other thing I could, that's logical that I could, that you can actually point to and say, this is where this could be coming from, is the moon. A little light bending there. Because the moon rules the cycle. So, what does the moon do to, say, men's genitalia and their like sperm count? Does it maybe go up and down during the month and during the moon cycles? I mean, we already know from simple names like lunatic, which is, interesting because, the moon deals with emotions. So obviously, if somebody is highly emotional, we might consider them a lunatic. You know what I mean? So what is that even teaching us? That just came out right now. Anyhow, with that word, we recognize that we are aware that the moon affects everybody. I mean, if it affects our waters, there's so much in this. It's so fun to talk about. Um, this little, this little celestial being, apparently, this little celestial being has such an effect on the entire planet. It controls all of the waters. It would be interesting to see what the rivers do and ponds and lakes do. Is somebody measuring that? I'm sure somebody is. Are they sharing it? I'll look it up. I'll look it up. And then also the woman's cycle. So if it has that, then why not it also affect the men? And um and that in itself, like, if you think about it. So my biggest awareness to this was when I was up in Alaska. And there's like probably altogether almost 1,000 people total working in one place. We work in different places, but we're all basically in one building. But we could be up to a half an acre away from each other, right? While we're working. But almost all the women, I would say maybe 10 to 25 women did not have their period at the same time the rest of us did. But I remember it took a few months, but I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, we've all synced to each other. Hundreds of us syncing to each other and having our periods at the same time." So, if that is happening, that literally shows us two things also. One, like, how magical is that? When we talk about like yin and yang and the dark mystery, like, that's a dark mystery. And I have a theory. This isn't part two. Let me think. What was part two? One is mystery. Oh, just the deep connection, like how that shows how we're connected. Women all over the world. It doesn't matter what race you are. Doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't even matter what time zone you come from. You will sync with the other women around you. What? And why are we not talking about this more? How interesting. That I just think that explains a lot. I think that's how we knew that how connected we were. We must have noticed that. So that brings me to another theory idea. From what I've learned and kind of inherently remember, is that women would, because we would all moon around the same time, we would gather. I know that there are stories like the Red Tent. I don't know if anybody's ever read that book, but it's about it. It's named the Red Tent because the Red Tent used to be the tent that the women would go to, and this was based on a Jewish woman's writing, somewhat like biblical historical writing. That in the Red Tent, the women would gather to have their moon or their period and sit. And part of me is like, is that also where the yoni steam came from? Probably. Anyhow, would sit basically over a pot or over a hole in the ground and would bleed into the ground. And then the other women who were not on their periods would take care of the women who were on their periods. It would be a whole thing. So when they talk about like so part of me is like, if we were hunter gatherers and we knew that we would sync our periods, then we would always have to be moving. However, I think from what the earth shows us and history shows us, or her story shows us, is that we had a time in history that was far more advanced with less tools needed, less footprint, so to speak, and like no trash, and we were able to harness energy and create things without with ease. Let's just say with more ease in ways that we can't figure out to today. The pyramids being an example, and there's so many other ancient artifacts and mystical buildings that to this day they're like, we don't know how it happened. Right? And my theories, it could have been wood and they carved it and then it petrified. That's one of my theories. However, I don't know because I think somehow we can tap into those things, but until we are more expansive in our minds, I don't know. Anyhow, um, but with that information, it shows me that maybe we weren't hunter gatherers in the way that they teach us, and also that if we were, there would have been some type of bleeding ground, so to speak, where the women could bleed either into the ground or into some type of pot. I know that there's all different kinds of ancient uses for the woman's menstruation or her moon. So, anyways, I think that this is a very curious, interesting, um, blatantly obvious way that we are able to connect and sync with each other and actually create in a way that also meant we were having babies at the same time. We would probably go through menopause at the same time. Like what? That's tremendous synchronization. And it would be obvious for the men. The men would all see that the women were all menstruating at the same time. Like, is that part of the division so that we wouldn't even see like the connection that we actually do have? I think the true division in like what we call matriarchy and patriarchy is basically just a concept, because I think during a time of creation, well, I'll say this. I think that humans have been around far longer than they tell us, and that when we call a time matriarchal, we still see hierarchy in a way that um, kind of defines like power and control, where I think there was a hierarchy, but it was more about like knowledge and practice. And it had less to do with control and less to do with like either male or female. I think it had to do with, um, like what we call like shamanistic abilities, and you practice and you become more knowledgeable, so then you might have a certain position in a community that somebody who's just starting wouldn't. Now that would make sense, but by no means would it be like that person is lesser. And I know that I have those um, judgments or perceptions of myself and others through certain conditioning, but I'm saying this because I have a theory. I think that there is proof that there was a predominantly feminine guided society um, that was more peaceful, more communal, and more connected to nature and ourselves and each other. And that through very subtle techniques, writing being one of them, and then less subtle, violence and extreme, brutality being the other, that these notions and ways of thinking and even proof have been removed from main society, so that maybe we don't remember that's how connected we are. Like, we're so connected that our periods will sync up to each other. Every woman on the planet. I mean, isn't that power? That's like unknown power. but known power. That makes sense too, because, we say we're all connected, we're all one. Well, that's some obvious, oneness right there. That's my video for today. I will share a little bit about my personal healing. So recently I had a treatment called orthobiotomy. I had not heard of that before. It is a very relaxing, comfortable, nurturing practice where light compression is used instead of, say, stretching or even direct pressure like massage or pure energy work like Reiki. And for me, what I experienced is going back to being a baby. And afterwards, the practitioner was like, yeah, like in the belly, we're being squeezed and held the whole time. And then you think about our childhoods and how we're held and squeezed and moved in certain ways, and then it kind of just stops at a certain age. And not that it shouldn't, but then maybe what we used to do is teach each other how to keep doing that even for ourselves, bring in all these different modalities. Anyhow, that's just an added theory. So it also brought up a lot of emotions, which I understand how the muscles will hold memory, and then I've shared with you all that as I've massaged certain areas or stretched or exercised, and many others I know have shared these experiences as well, where they might have some type of emotional release. Even if you run a lot, you might even get nauseous. You know what I'm saying? Like, our body will show us different things in different ways and how we might hold things in our bodies. And so with that, and just recognizing a lot of my own patterns for a lot of my choices that I've made in my relationships that have been all the words that come with it, but basically is our forms of abuse that we are afraid to call abuse because most of us have been raised in these forms of abuse and they've become normalized. And I think what's happening from, what's happening worldwide as far as the virus goes, that a new form of understanding this about ourselves is being forced up. And it is really intense because the pattern is everywhere. If you don't have it at home, you have it at school. If you don't have it at school, you might have it at work. If you don't have it at work, somewhere, somebody's religion, different things that kind of pattern us towards, away from our shadow side. Let me just put it that way, being afraid of our shadow side. And so, with the orthobiotomy treatment, my own personal, work, which is I've been going to therapy. I do a lot more writing than I used to. I have to take time to really think about my feelings and allow myself to express them. I've shared with you certain videos I watched on YouTube that helped with that. And then also really switching how I eat, how I talk to myself and practice. I got to practice every day. Like, it's a completely different awareness of quote unquote light work that is, I think, often skewed into, just wanting to push past it and get over it. Like, get over it already is like the general, energy of, I mean, we're doing it even with the virus. Like, let's get over it already. Like, it's been so long when actually time has been going by quite quickly. And it's teaching it's teaching a lot of things. It's and a lot of truths are coming out. So also some calcium bentonite, but good grief, I haven't been as healthy for the last couple of years. And so cleaning out, like, I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but sometimes when you start cleaning your body out, you actually experience heightened symptoms of the symptoms you've been feeling for a while, and actually may um, persuade from continuing. I did take a day and bring in other things, like I'm juicing and I do carrot juice and some citrus juicing and um, bananas, and bringing in more soft foods, easy to digest foods, so that I can eventually get on the Kalima board and clean out my body some more. And I will be sharing that all with you guys. Um, but for now, I'm just kind of taking it slowly because I have a lot of clearing to do and stillness to be practicing, and action, like all of it. So, and it's helping. It's getting the language for it as well has helped a lot. So I want to say it is challenging and heartbreaking and uplifting and powerful, and it's vulnerability, realistically, and accepting the darkest side of myself and then utilizing it as best I can. And I'm still learning things. Um, and I think it's important to do that because, good grief, if my period syncs with somebody, then so does so many other things that I may not be aware of. So, um, thanks for listening all the way through, and for watching. May you and your families and your friends and the things that you care about be supported and uplifted. May you be supported and uplifted. All right. Till next time.